Hello, my dear ones. This is my first story. Maybe the first time I'm truly opening my heart to the world. I never imagined that one day I would sit in front of a camera, not to smile, not to celebrate, but to finally speak about a life that tested every corner of my soul. You see, when you reach my age, you carry more memories than dreams. Some of those memories shine like sunlight through an open window, and some, they hurt like a shadow that never leaves. I've lived long enough to know that life doesn't always give you what you hope for. Sometimes, it gives you lessons that shape the person you become. I was just a girl when I first believed in forever. I grew up in a small, quiet town where everyone knew everyone. My mother used to hum songs while cooking, and my father would tell me stories about love, stories that made me believe love was the most beautiful thing in the world. I held on to that belief like a treasure. I wasn't born into luxury. We didn't have gold or silk, but we had warmth. My home was small, yet filled with laughter. We had tea together every evening, sitting on a worn-out carpet, talking about dreams that seemed so close. I thought happiness was something simple, a kind word, a shared smile, the feeling of being seen. And then, one day, love came knocking, or at least I thought it was love. He was tall, soft-spoken, and had a charm that could melt anyone's heart. When he smiled, I felt my world light up. I was young, innocent, full of trust. Everyone said I was lucky. They said he would take care of me, that I would live like a queen. On my wedding day, I wore a simple dress. My hands trembled as my mother placed the veil on my head. She whispered, "Be patient, my daughter. Marriage is not always easy, but love will guide you." I believed her, because mothers don't lie, do they? When I stepped into my new home, everything felt like a dream. The house smelled of fresh flowers. The air was full of blessings and laughter. For the first few weeks, I thought I was the happiest woman alive. I cooked for him, waited for him by the window every evening, listened to his stories, and smiled at his every word. But slowly, the laughter began to fade. His smiles became rare. His eyes, once so kind, turned distant. I told myself, maybe he's just tired. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and the warmth I once felt turned cold. I started noticing small things, the way he avoided looking at me, the way his tone changed. I remember the first time he raised his voice, not because of anger, but because he wanted to remind me of my place. That night, I sat by the window, tears running silently down my face. I didn't understand. How could someone who once promised the world now make me feel so small? I thought if I tried harder, loved deeper, maybe things would go back to how they were. So I stayed quiet. I cooked his favorite meals, smiled when I wanted to cry, and told myself, tomorrow will be better. But tomorrow never came. Months passed. Then one night, he came home late, smelling of someone else's perfume. I felt my heart sink, but I stayed silent. I didn't have the courage to ask questions. I feared the truth. I feared losing the only person I ever loved. Days later, I found a letter in his coat pocket, a name I didn't recognize, written with affection that wasn't meant for me. My hand shook as I read it. I felt my chest tighten, my world collapse. Yet, I said nothing. I folded that letter, placed it back, and carried on as if nothing had happened. People often think silence means strength, but silence can also mean breaking, quietly, slowly, unseen. One evening, I tried to talk to him. I asked him if he still loved me, if we could start again, if we could fix what was broken. He looked at me, and for a moment I thought I saw regret, but then he laughed, not out of joy, but out of pity. He said, "You're too emotional. You always have been." That night, I broke. I went to the kitchen, sat on the cold floor, and cried until I could no longer breathe. My tears felt endless. Every sob carried the weight of 100 dreams that would never come true. But life didn't stop there. The pain turned into something deeper, a silence that lived inside me. I learned to move like a ghost inside my own home. I cooked, cleaned, smiled for the world, and died a little every day behind closed doors. One day, everything changed. He came home angry, for reasons I didn't even understand. I tried to calm him, to speak gently, but his anger turned to violence. I remember his hand striking me, the shock, the sound of my heart breaking louder than the slap itself. I remember falling down, my body trembling, my mind numb. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. My ribs ached, my face swollen. The nurse looked at me with pity. She whispered, "You're lucky to be alive." But I didn't feel lucky. I felt empty. When I looked at the window beside my bed, I saw the sunlight coming in, and I wondered why the world still looked so peaceful when my own world had collapsed. It was there, in that cold hospital room, that I realized nobody was going to save me. Not love, not hope, not even time. If I wanted to live, I had to stand again, not because I was strong, but because I had no other choice. When I left the hospital, I didn't go back to that house. I went back to my mother's small home, the same place I had left years ago with dreams of love. She opened the door, looked at me, and without saying a word, she held me. I cried in her arms like a child again. Sometimes, a mother's silence says more than words ever could. Days turned into weeks. I tried to rebuild myself, piece by piece. But every mirror reminded me of the woman I used to be, the girl who once believed in forever. It took me years to heal, not from the bruises, but from the memories. I had to teach myself how to breathe again, how to laugh without guilt, how to find beauty in simple things. I started writing, not for others, but for myself. I wrote letters I'd never send, to people I'd never meet. I poured my heart into words, hoping that one day, they'd make sense. And maybe that's why I'm here today, speaking to you, because I don't want my pain to go to waste. If my story can make one person feel less alone, if it can remind someone that life doesn't end when your heart breaks, then every tear I've shed was worth it. They say time heals all wounds. That's not true. Time doesn't heal, it teaches. It shows you that you can survive what you thought would destroy you. I'm not telling you this story to make you sad. I'm telling it because every scar has a story, and sometimes, those stories can save someone else. When I came back to my mother's house, it felt like time had stopped. Everything looked the same. The cracked walls, the little wooden table, the old curtains that danced with the wind. But inside me, everything had changed. I was not the same girl who had once left this home with dreams in her eyes and a heart full of trust. I had returned broken, empty, and silent. In the beginning, I couldn't sleep. Every night, I would wake up to the echo of that house. His voice, his anger, his laughter with someone else. The memories haunted me like ghosts that refused to leave. I tried to pray, but even my prayers felt heavy. My mother used to sit beside me at night, holding my hand like I was a child again. She would whisper, "It's over now, my daughter. You are safe." But safety felt like a distant dream. For months, I didn't step outside. I was ashamed, not because of what he did, but because I had allowed myself to lose everything for someone who never cared. I would stare at my reflection and ask, "Who are you now?" The woman in the mirror looked older, weaker, and tired, but somewhere deep inside, a spark still lived. A small voice whispered, "You survived." It took time for me to listen to that voice. Healing is not a straight road. It's a path full of stumbles, tears, and tiny victories that no one else sees. One morning, my mother placed a small cup of tea in front of me and said, "Go outside. Feel the sunlight again." I hesitated, but something inside me said, "Maybe it's time." I remember stepping out into the courtyard. The sunlight felt warm on my skin. The air smelled of jasmine and dust. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I breathed deeply. That breath didn't fix me, but it reminded me I was still alive. Days slowly turned into months. I began helping my mother around the house, cooking again, sweeping the floor, watering the plants. Little by little, life began to move. The neighbors would come by and greet me. Some looked at me with pity, some with curiosity, but I learned to smile politely and stay silent. Not everyone deserves to know your pain. Then one day, something small but powerful happened. A young girl from the neighborhood came running to our door, crying. Her little brother had broken his toy, and she wanted someone to fix it. I didn't know why, but she came to me. I took the toy, a small wooden cart, and tried to mend it. Her tears stopped when I handed it back. She smiled, and that smile did something to me. It reminded me of kindness, of connection, of how simple moments can bring light into dark places. After she left, I sat for hours thinking. I realized that maybe, just maybe, I still had something to give to the world. I couldn't change my past, but I could choose what to do with the time left in my hands. I started writing again. My old notebook became my best friend. Every night, I wrote a little, sometimes about love, sometimes about loss, sometimes just about how the moon looked that evening. Writing didn't erase my pain, but it helped me understand it. It became my way of speaking to the silence. And then came the day that changed everything. I was sitting outside, watching the sunset, when a letter arrived. My heart trembled as I recognized the handwriting. It was him. For a moment, I didn't know whether to open it or burn it. My hands shook as I tore the envelope open. Inside was a short message. No apology, no regret, just words that cut through me again. He wrote that he had remarried and was living far away, that he hoped I had moved on. Moved on. Those 2 words hit me like a storm. How easily he wrote them, like the years we spent together were just a passing season. I sat there for a long time, the letter in my lap, the wind rustling through the paper like it wanted to carry it away. That night, I cried again, but this time, the tears were different. They weren't for him anymore. They were for me, for the years I lost, for the love I gave freely, for the girl I used to be. And when the tears stopped, I looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "Thank you." Yes, I thanked the pain, because it had finally set me free. From that moment, I promised myself I would no longer live as a shadow of what was. I would live as the woman who had survived. I began helping children in the neighborhood, teaching them to read, telling them stories. Their laughter filled the air again, and somehow, it filled me too. One of them called me Grandma, and I smiled. That was the first time in years that word didn't hurt. It felt like a gift. I learned something powerful during those days, that life always gives you another chance, even when you think it's over. It may not be the life you planned, but it can still be beautiful. As the seasons changed, I began to feel peace in small things. The sound of rain on the roof, the smell of tea, the laughter of children, the quiet moments with my mother. I realized happiness doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from learning to live with what you have and being grateful for what remains. Then, after a few years, my mother passed away. Her death left a silence that no sound could fill. I remember holding her hand in her last moments. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "You've become stronger than I ever was." Those were her last words. I buried her beneath a tree she loved, a tree that blooms with white flowers every spring. And every spring since, I visit her there. I talk to her. I tell her how I'm doing. I tell her I'm okay. Her loss broke me, but it also reminded me of everything she taught me, that even when life shatters you, you can rebuild yourself piece by piece, and those pieces can still shine. Now, when I look back, I see that every pain I endured shaped the woman I am today. If I hadn't known betrayal, I wouldn't have known strength. If I hadn't faced loneliness, I wouldn't have discovered self-love. If I hadn't lost everything, I wouldn't have learned what truly matters. And that, my dear ones, is what I want you to understand. Sometimes, life will take everything away, not to punish you, but to teach you how strong you really are. You see, I once thought my story ended in that hospital bed, but now, I know it was only the beginning of another chapter, the chapter where I found myself again. The years that followed were quiet, too quiet, sometimes. After my mother passed, the house felt emptier than ever. There were days when the silence was so heavy that I could hear my own heartbeat echo through the rooms. I learned that loneliness isn't always about being alone. Sometimes it's about missing the voices that once filled your world. But in that silence, I also found something I had never known before, clarity. I began to see life not as something that happened to me, but as something that taught me. Every moment, even the painful ones, carried a lesson. I started to spend my mornings sitting by the window with a cup of tea, watching the sunrise. There's something magical about mornings, how the sky changes from darkness to light, quietly, patiently. It reminded me that life, too, changes in silence. Pain doesn't leave all at once. It fades slowly, like night giving way to dawn. I often thought about my younger self, that girl who believed love was everything. I wanted to reach back in time and hold her hand, to tell her that love is not just about giving your heart to someone else. It's about learning to give it to yourself when no one else will. There were days I missed the laughter, the companionship, the feeling of being seen. But there were also days I enjoyed my solitude. I learned to cook for myself, to talk to the plants in my garden, to read old books, and to find beauty in things most people overlook. And yet, sometimes, I would find myself wondering, where did the years go? I would touch my face, tracing the lines time had drawn, and think, each wrinkle tells a story. Some were written by sorrow, some by laughter, some by survival. I realized that growing old is not a loss. It's a privilege. Many never get to see their hair turn silver, never get the time to reflect on the roads they've walked. One afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. A young woman, a neighbor's daughter, came to see me. She said she'd heard about my life from others and wanted advice. Her eyes were full of tears, and her words trembled as she told me her story. A story of heartbreak, betrayal, and fear. I listened, quietly, patiently. When she finished, she looked at me and asked, "How did you survive it all?" I smiled, and I said, "I didn't survive it all at once. I survived one breath at a time, one sunrise at a time. There were days I wanted to give up, but I kept going, not because I was brave, but because I still had life inside me. And life, my dear, is too precious to give away to pain." She cried, and I held her hand, the same way my mother once held mine. At that moment, I realized life had come full circle. Once, I was the one who needed saving. Now, I had become the one who gave hope. After she left, I sat for a long time in silence. I thought about all the people out there, broken, lost, waiting for someone to remind them that they still matter. That's when an idea began to form in my heart. I thought, what if I shared my story? Not for sympathy, but for connection. Not to reopen wounds, but to help others heal. And that's why I'm here today, speaking to you, my dear listeners, through this story. This is my first time sharing my truth with the world. Not because I want to relive the pain, but because I want you to understand that pain doesn't have to be the end of your story. The truth is, no one's life is perfect. We all have our hidden battles, our silent tears, our unspoken fears. But every scar you carry is proof that you fought, and that you're still here. As I grew older, I realized that happiness is not found in big moments. It's found in little things. A warm cup of tea on a cold morning, the sound of rain tapping on the window, a kind word from a stranger, the feeling of peace when you forgive yourself. You see, for so many years, I searched for happiness in others. I believed someone else could give it to me, through love, attention, or care. But happiness isn't something you receive, it's something you grow inside yourself. Like a plant, it needs patience, light, and time. There are still days when I feel lonely. There are nights when the silence feels too loud. But even then, I remind myself, I am still here. I am still breathing. And that is enough. Sometimes, I take out my old notebooks and read the letters I wrote to myself. They remind me of the journey, how far I've come, how many storms I've walked through. I've learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. Healing means remembering without breaking. When I look at my reflection now, I no longer see the broken woman who came home years ago. I see someone who fought her way through darkness and found the light again. I've lived long enough to know that people change, life changes, and everything you think is permanent can disappear overnight. But one thing remains, the strength you build from within. That's something no one can take away. I often tell the children who visit me now, be kind, not because the world will always be kind to you, but because kindness keeps your heart soft. And in this hard world, having a soft heart is a strength, not a weakness. So here I am, sitting in my old chair, with my silver hair and wrinkled hands, telling you my story, not because I want you to pity me, but because I want you to believe. If I could rise again after everything I went through, so can you. Her voice softens, a faint smile appears. We all have chapters in our lives we wish we could rewrite, but sometimes it's the painful chapters that make the story worth reading. And as I sit here today, with the evening light falling softly through the curtains, I realize something beautiful. I am not defined by what I lost. I am defined by what I found after the loss. Peace, purpose, and the strength to keep living with love. You know, my dear, when you reach my age, you stop chasing things that don't matter. You stop running after people who left. Stop replaying moments that hurt. Stop expecting life to go the way you planned. You simply sit back, breathe, and thank God for another sunrise, for another chance to smile, even if no one's watching. There was a time when I thought happiness was a destination, something I would reach after I found the right person, or the perfect moment. But life taught me that happiness isn't a destination, it's a way of walking. You can cry and still be grateful. You can be alone and still be complete. You can be broken and still choose to love. There were nights I sat by the window, talking to the stars, asking them questions no one could answer. Why did they leave? Why did it hurt so much? Why did I have to lose everything before I found peace? But the stars never spoke. They just listened, silently, gently, reminding me that even silence can heal. Over the years, I learned to forgive, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Holding on to pain doesn't hurt the one who caused it. It hurts you. And when you finally let go, your soul feels light, like a bird that's been caged for too long, finally set free. There's something beautiful about growing old. People think aging means losing youth, but it also means gaining wisdom. When you've seen enough winters, you learn that nothing lasts forever. Not pain, not joy, not people, but the love you give, that stays. It echoes in the hearts you touched, the words you spoke, the kindness you left behind. I sometimes look at my hands, wrinkled, trembling, covered with tiny veins, and I remember how these hands once held a child, cooked for a family, wiped away tears, built a home, and held on through every storm. They've done enough. They've carried love, pain, and hope, and they still open each morning to greet another day. To those listening to me right now, I want you to remember this. Life will not always be gentle. People will disappoint you. Love will hurt. But please, don't let it turn your heart cold. Even after everything, choose love again, choose kindness again, choose hope again. Because life isn't about avoiding pain, it's about finding meaning in it. The broken parts of you are not your weakness. They're proof that you tried, that you cared deeply, that you lived fully. Sometimes, I imagine if I could speak to my younger self one last time, I'd tell her, don't cry over the people who didn't stay. Don't chase love that doesn't see your worth. And don't ever forget, you are enough, even when you stand alone. Now, in these final years, I live quietly. The days pass slower, but they're filled with peace. I no longer need a full house to feel loved. I just need a quiet heart and a warm memory. And every night, before I close my eyes, I whisper a small prayer for every person out there who feels lost, lonely, or unloved. May you find the strength to keep going. May you realize that your story isn't over yet, because mine wasn't over when I thought it was. It began again, the day I decided to live, even after all the reasons not to. So, my dear listener, if you're hurting tonight, if your heart feels heavy, remember this. The same way I survived, you will too. Don't give up. Don't let your scars define you. One day, you'll look back and realize the pain that broke you also built you. Life is short, my dear. Say what you need to say. Forgive while you can. Hold your loved ones tighter. Smile more often. And never forget to tell your story, because someone out there might need to hear it to survive their own. And if this old woman's story has touched even one heart tonight, then my pain was not in vain. This was my first story, but not my last. Because as long as I breathe, I'll keep reminding the world that even the weakest heart can still beat strong.